Imagine, if you will, a time when the very idea of race didn't exist, a time when human differences were seen through the lens of culture, geography, and social class, rather than the stark labels we use today. Our story begins not in the lecture halls of modern universities, but in the crucible of human evolution. All human life began in Africa, where our ancestors with richly pigmented skin, perfectly suited to the relentless tropical sun, set the stage for what would become one of the most astonishing journeys in history. As these early hominins ventured out of Africa, the environments they encountered forced them to adapt. In the cool, dimmer climes of northern latitudes, natural selection nudged our skin to lighten, a gradual, almost poetic transformation that allowed for better vitamin D synthesis in regions with scarce sunlight. It is a change that, over tens of thousands of years, would contribute to the superficial differences we now notice among people. Yet, let's not jump to conclusions. There's a twist here. The term white people, as we know it today, isn't a label handed down by nature as genetic decree, but rather a construct forged by historical forces. In the ancient world of Greece and Rome, for instance, skin color was noted but never used to divide humanity into rigid, opposing groups. Citizens were defined by their language, culture, and legal rights rather than the hue of their skin. What a relief it must have been then not to be saddled with the modern baggage of whiteness or non-whiteness, right? The real metamorphosis of the idea begins during the early modern period. As European explorers set sail and colonial empires expanded, the world started to be seen through a new, often dangerous prism, that of race. Intellectuals and pseudoscientists of the 17th and 18th centuries, think Johann Blumenbach and his contemporaries, began to sort humanity into neat categories. They marveled at the ideal features of Northern Europeans, a group they soon dubbed Caucasians, while simultaneously labeling others with disparaging epithets. These classifications weren't merely academic exercises, they laid the groundwork for systems of privilege and subjugation. In a rather ironic twist, the very term white came to symbolize power and superiority, a myth that would underpin colonial domination, slavery, and later, segregation. It's as if the modern world was handed a set of instructions that said, "Welcome to society. If you're white, you're in. If not, you're out." But here's where modern science swoops in to set the record straight. If you look at our DNA, you'll find that the differences between human populations are remarkably small. Genetic studies have revealed that around 99.9% of our genetic code is shared by every human being, and that most genetic variation exists within so-called racial groups rather than between them. This isn't just a quirky fact, it is a profound reminder that the concept of distinct races is more a social and political invention than a biological reality. In fact, even our so-called white ancestry is a mosaic, a blend of genes inherited from ancient populations that intermingled with Neanderthals and other archaic humans as modern Homo sapiens marched out of Africa. Those Neanderthal genes, for example, have influenced traits like immune responses and even aspects of skin tone in Europeans. Yet they are just one tiny thread in the rich tapestry of our ancestry. So how did whiteness come to be seen as a unified identity? The answer is a mix of history, ideology, and economics. In the context of colonial expansion, European powers needed a way to rationalize their dominance. They crafted a narrative in which whiteness was not only a marker of physical appearance, but also a symbol of moral and intellectual superiority. This narrative was used to justify the exploitation of other peoples and the establishment of racial hierarchies. Laws were written and social norms established that reinforced these divisions. In colonial America, for instance, being classified as white became a legal status that conferred rights and privileges while excluding others. As waves of immigrants arrived, some of whom, like the Irish, Italians, and Eastern Europeans, were not initially considered white by the old elite, the definition of whiteness expanded and shifted. It became a moving target, redefined time and again by the needs of those in power. Now, while the historical origins of white identity are steeped in this legacy of exclusion and oppression, today the narrative is anything but static. Scholars like Nell Irvin Painter have challenged us to re-examine the invention as of race by peeling back layers of myth and prejudice to reveal that whiteness as a concept is both recent and mutable. Rather than a timeless, natural category, White identity has been continuously constructed, deconstructed, and reconstructed over centuries in response to changing political, economic, and social circumstances. In our modern era, where conversations about race and identity are as charged as ever, the idea that one can neatly divide humanity into white and non-white is increasingly being questioned. People are reclaiming their complex, multifaceted identities and acknowledging that these divisions, however ingrained, are the products of historical circumstances rather than immutable truths. What does all this mean for us today? For one, it invites a healthy dose of skepticism toward any narrative that claims to explain human diversity solely in terms of skin color. As Gen Zers and curious thinkers, we are wired to question traditional narratives, yet there's something reassuring in the enduring lessons of the past. Our history teaches us that while the notion of race was invented to serve particular interests, our shared humanity transcends those artificial lines. The same DNA that runs through a person with light skin in Northern Europe flows through someone with a darker complexion in the Mediterranean or the Middle East. Our differences are subtle brushstrokes on the grand canvas of human evolution, a canvas painted over tens of thousands of years by migrations, intermarriage, and the slow, relentless march of natural selection. There is also a poetic justice in realizing that the divisions we once thought defined us are now being blurred by the very processes that have always been at work: migration, adaptation, and cultural exchange. Just as our ancestors left footprints on the deserts of Africa and the ice fields of Europe, so too have they left imprints on our genes carrying stories of survival, resilience, and transformation. The modern concept of white people is not a fixed essence but a reflection of historical circumstances, one that has evolved, adapted, and even been reimagined as societies grapple with the legacies of empire, slavery, and colonialism. In closing, the origin of what we call white people is not a tale of inherent superiority or a natural, divinely ordained division of humankind. It is instead a story of human ingenuity and at times human folly, a story that underscores the power of ideas to shape societies and the lives of millions. By tracing this narrative from the evolutionary adaptations that lightened our skin to the political and social constructs that defined entire nations, we come to understand that our identities are far more fluid and interconnected than rigid categories might suggest. Let us then take this knowledge not as a source of division, but as a reminder of our shared journey. A journey that started in a sun-drenched savanna in Africa and led to the sprawling mosaic of cultures we see around the world today. And as we continue to debate, learn, and evolve, may we do so with the awareness that every label has a history, every boundary a story, and every one of us a connection to a past that is as rich and varied as the human spirit itself.